Hello everyone, I am Tabir Ghulam Kader, student of College of Media Sciences, your host for today, live from the platform of Ziauddin University. So if we look around these days, social media is everywhere. Even now, we are connected through social media. We are connected through internet. Every one of you have all the gadgets, I believe, MacBooks, phones, everything, laptops. We are connected through a laptop right now. The social media is turning into a global village. It is everywhere. Kids are using it, literate people are using it, illiterate people are using it, everyone knows about it. And in the last few in last few months, because of the pandemic, the social media and internet has been everywhere, because we were not able to go out of our houses, we were not physically participating into anything. So we were participating through internet. We were just homebound, and internet was everything that we had, social media was everything that we had. It has been very beneficial for the students. We have been connected through, Zoom meetings and Google meetings for our educational purposes, and our kids have been learning through it. We didn't miss our schools. Kids didn't miss our schools and everything, but it has been a little bit off guard as well for our health. The students have been going through health issues as well because of the social media. So according to the recent stats of 2021, almost 3.96 billion people currently use social media worldwide, with average users having 8.6 accounts per person. It's a huge amount of accounts to handle actually. The current percentage of people using social media is 50.69%. So the worldwide population, 50.69% worldwide population has been using social media, and it is increasing because of the pandemic situation in the entire world. So we chose today's dialogues topic. It is very interesting topic. It is very debatable yet very interesting. So our dialogues topic today is the power of hashtag, navigating the social media landscape. So in today's session, we'll be discussing about the analysis with our panelists and our guest about how strong a hashtag is, how much influence the social media has on our users, what's the right and positive use of social media, and how can we have optimistic change in social media. I would like to welcome you all to the fifth interactive series of ZU Dialogues, which is organized by the PR and Communication Department of Ziauddin College of Media Sciences, Ziauddin University. I would also like to thank Mr. Amish Azad, who gave me this opportunity to host this webinar. Previously, Sir have organized many webinars and seminars on different social, cultural, educational, and on economical topics according to the ongoing scenarios and current happenings. Today, as I told you all, the topic for our session is the power of hashtag, navigating the social media landscape. Social media network platforms almost tripled to their users from 970 million in 2010 to 3.81 billion in 2020. So for the further discussion, I would like to introduce our panelist and guest speaker for today. So on our panel today, I would like to welcome Tahmina Lohdi. She is the Associate Professor and Principal of Ziauddin College of Media Sciences, Ziauddin University. She has worked with advertising agencies and freelanced in creative field of art for more than a decade and continues to freelance as a designer and artist with reputable organizations. She's worked as a production designer for various projects in TV and film industry. Prior to joining Ziauddin University, she served as the head department of media sciences at Iqra University from 2006 to 2017. She's also worked in mental health as a psychotherapist. Hello, how are you? Then we
Hi,
have...
Tabir, I'm fine. Thank you for the
Thank you.
introduction.
Then we have Mr. Kamal Siddiqui. He is the Director, Center of Excellence in Journalism at IBN Karachi. He has over 26 years of experience in journalism and media training. From 2009 to 2016, he was the editor of the Express Tribune. He has also worked with The News as editor reporting, with Daily Dawn as a leader writer, as a member of the paper's editorial board, and with several international publications and media outlets, including The Economist, Intelligence Unit, and Dow Jones Newswire. At present, he is the fellow of the Center of Democratic Development and Rule of Law at Stanford University. He is also a senior non-resident fellow with the Atlantic Council. Hello, sir.
Hello, Tabi. Thank you for that really nice introduction. And I'm happy to be on your program.
Thank you so much. Then we have Ms. Najia Asher. She is the senior broadcast journalist, media trainer with 18 years of experience in Pakistan's mainstream media. Najia is founder of Global Neighborhood of Media Innovation, GNMI. She also founded a Media Better, a community space for intellectual and cultural engagement for media and civil society organization in 2019. Prior to this, Ms. Asher successfully received one of the most prestigious and well-known fellowship, John S. Knight Journalism Fellowship at Stanford University in 2014. She has also worked as a morning host, editor news program host. Prior to that, she worked as senior anchor producer at Geo News for 12 years. Hello, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me on this topic. That is the most important topic, I guess.
Yes, we are glad to have you. We'll have a discussions further as well. And for today, we have a very special guest speaker for this session. We have Brittany Stewart, Information Officer, spokesperson at U.S. Consulate General Karachi. Brittany previously served as the Consular Officer in Bangkok, Thailand, as the Assistant Cultural Affairs Officer in Mumbai, India. Prior to joining the Department of State, Brittany consulted for Save the Children and U.S. Agency for International Development. She has a master's in public administration from Columbia University and a master's in public policy from the National University of Singapore. Hello, ma'am.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak.
Sure, no problem at all. So to begin this session, as I told you all the topic, once again, I'm going to tell you all the power of hashtag. I really want to start with the little opinion from the panelist of ours, and I want to know how powerful do you think is the hashtag? Let's start off with Mr. Kamal Siddiqui. What do you think? How powerful it is, in your opinion?
In my opinion, Tabi, there are a couple of things we have to put into context. You yourself, in your introduction, you talked about the literate, and then you used the word the illiterate people in terms of the growth of social media. Exactly. People who cannot read and write. So to begin with, in Pakistan, we have a very low literacy rate. So people who cannot read and write functionally are much higher. So the approximate is around 33% of our people are literate. So we have this huge mass of people who cannot read newspapers to begin with, and they have limited access to television. So for them, social media or the smartphone has become a boon, and you can see the massive rise in Pakistan, not just in terms of the use of smartphone, but the use of social media, especially the phenomenal use, I hope you'd mentioned it as well, was the phenomenal use of TikTok over the past year, over the pandemic year. So these are things in front of me. At the same time, as a journalist, I'm also seeing that when we look at social media is comparatively much more freer as compared to mainstream media. And we've seen that in Pakistan now. Mainstream media is being heavily censored. If I want to look for some news, if I want to know what's happening, I go to Twitter, for example. I don't go to some major news publication. So that also tells me that the importance. Now, your question is how important are hashtags?
How powerful it is.
How powerful? I think most important here is that when we look at hashtags, initially we would just say that when social media started, it was also called the new media, and people did not take it that seriously. Now, increasingly in a country like Pakistan, people are resorting to social media to highlight their problems, to air their grievances, to tell their stories, to generally say all that is not possible on mainstream media, whether it's through censorship, through space, through commercial consideration, whatever. Time and again, we have seen hashtags have been used. Very recently, if we look at what's happened in Pakistan in terms of different controversies that take place, hashtags, the most I think recent, of course, was the examinations, education, boycott of examinations. Then it's continuous. Every day there's a hashtag on. In fact, what I do every morning when I wake up is that I look at the hashtag, the trending stories from Twitter, the hashtags from Twitter, and I get an idea what's happening in my country. So it's become the prime source of news for me, these hashtags. So they're very important for me. They help change. And I've seen this happen that the government takes notice if something goes viral. Time and again, we have seen it. Very recently, with the demolitions that were taking place in Karachi, in different parts where the settlements, it was a social media campaign as it was a campaign on ground. The government took notice. We have seen time and again, very recently, only a day back, you must have seen the brothers who were beating up their sister. That went viral on social media. The government took notice and FIR was. So it's a very powerful medium now in today's day and age.
Yeah, the hashtag for that was domestic violence. I read about it like a day before. So, Tahmina Lodi, what is your take on this? How powerful is the hashtag?
Yeah, Tabir. So just like Kamal Saab has mentioned, hashtags are very powerful. And I'll speak from a marketing perspective because I look at brands and services and in terms of using hashtags over there. So I think hashtags have these like basic 4 purposes and user engagement. They increase your user engagement. They give you a significant online visibility. They're obviously there to reach to a broader audience and then expand the brand awareness. So they've created quite a contribution to the social media presence, and using like top hashtags is like a winning strategy for most of your businesses that are running online. And like Kamal Saab also mentioned, like Twitter was the first platform where hashtags were actually introduced. And I did a little bit of search and found that, in 2007, that is when this symbol of the hashtag gained the most importance. And Chris Messina was the first one who introduced it actually on Twitter. And in 2009, it got automatically adapted with hyperlinking terms with like the hashtag sign and also with, trending topics. So I think this eventually, people came to understand the importance of hashtags, especially I'm talking in terms of business. And this frenzy is an integral part of the social media buzz and the platforms. When you're using hashtags on social media, it's not just, it's important that you do a certain level of research. You just don't go and put any hashtag to whatever you are, let's say, marketing or selling, and you need to find out which kind of hashtag suits your business or the service you're providing. You need a strategy and a structure with that. And also to understand which social media platforms actually use hashtag more than others, like Twitter does, Facebook does, but not as much. So you need to have like a kind of understanding of how to use the hashtag, not just use the hashtag. So that's my perspective on hashtags. And I feel that a lot of businesses have benefited a lot by using this symbol to generate more of an audience for them.
Yeah, you're right, because these businesses have been trending a lot. They have their own hashtags and everything. They go along and they're being successful every day. So, Miss Najia, what do you think about it? Or what is the power of hashtag to you? How do you take it?
Well, my opinion is not different. It is a powerful tool in online communication and engagement, and this little symbol, it helps us to optimize content and conversations. It can raise the awareness, it can create political discourse. On the other hand, it can also used as a tool to create political turbulence. When we use a hashtag, it instantly links our social media post to a group of others, the people who are also talking about the same thing. So it creates a community of voices to discuss trending topics and issues. If we go back a few years, when we started using this little symbol, it has done some great things. These hashtags, they were used, and they brought communities together during times of tragedy and suffering, and they have helped amplifying our feelings and emotions on all sorts of issues, whether they are political issues, they are social, or related to our surroundings, from international to political, local. And there is no better example of how the hashtag collectively described our feelings following the terror attacks in Paris and Sydney. We saw the hashtag Pray for Paris. Another big hashtag of 2015 was Black Lives Matter. It was used more than 9 million times by people who wanted to express their anger. They wanted to express their emotions. And yes, we cannot forget hashtag Bring Back Our Girls from Nigeria, and hashtag Me Too campaigns that has shown us that social media is more than just pictures and selfies. So these hashtags, they demonstrated how connected we are in a geographically and culturally separated world. And if we look at the local hashtags, we cannot forget Justice for Shahzad. You must have remembered a young boy who was murdered in Karachi, and justice movement gained a significant presence online at that time. And then there was a hashtag Justice for Zainab. That is another example of the powerful hashtags. In political discourse, when we look at the politics, especially in Pakistan, 2018 elections, they were all a game of hashtags. Social media was very active. And what was the hashtag? It was Balle Pe Thappa. And millions of people used that hashtag at that time. When we look at the US election, so at that time, in 2016, Russian bots were accused of manipulating conversations. So all over the world, I would say we see the power of hashtags, but let me say this, that this power, it is not only used for building positive narratives. It does not come without problems. It is also being used for negativity, for spreading false information and lies. So power of hashtags is a big challenge for the society right now.
I totally agree with you, and you have put it up very nicely that it is used positive yet negative as well. It depends on the audience how they take it. It is used negative as well. So I'm so sorry I pronounced your name wrong. It was Najia. Sir Kamal just corrected me.
It's Najia.
Yeah, it's Najia. I said Najia. I'm so sorry about that. So moving further with the discussion, there are a lot of questions that I want to ask you, and there are a lot of discussions we have to do today. But Brittany today is going to give us a presentation about it, and I would like Brittany to continue with it if she's ready.
Yes, I am ready.
Yeah,
and it's a good thing, but a lot of what I covered was actually covered by the panelists and yourself as well. So I'll keep mine short and just add a bit more of my thoughts. But again, I just wanted to thank Zayedin University for inviting me to speak to you all. And I also look forward to hearing more of the thoughts and opinions of the participating panelists as we discuss and really debate as well the rise and influence of social media around the world. It's without question that in the years and decades ahead, global social media and its landscape will become more complex and far-reaching, not less. And I know you gave statistics earlier, but another one that was interesting to me, that according to Data Reportal, the number of global social media users has more than doubled since January 2016. So that means 1 billion new users have been added to the global total in the past 3 years alone. And so while the growth of social media penetration has increased year to year, as was already mentioned by the panelists, we've seen this growth increase exponentially since and during the outbreak of COVID-19. And so with the social media, there are benefits and negatives. And again, I'll touch upon a bit of what the panelists have already covered. So for example, during the pandemic, the United Nations had warned the world that the toll of COVID-19 would lead to increased isolation, fear, and uncertainty, having a negative impact on people's mental health. And so, how did social media respond, right? It does what it does best. It connects people. And so, despite the inability to enjoy each other's presence in person, new platforms rised up, such as Zoom, the platform we're using now, as well as older platforms such as Facebook through its updated messenger rooms, developed and innovated and changed to allow people to connect in larger groups for video conversations. And I imagine and expect that these types of platforms will only continue to grow in the years ahead. And so as Nadia Kingsley mentioned, one of the most pressing functions and roles of social media that we've seen in society has been its potential in promoting and spreading activism and activist campaigns. And so, while social media's potential for online inspired change is not new, we saw the growth and rise of it in 2020, and this level of social media activism being taken on to a whole new level. And as Nadia Kingsley pointed out, we saw that in the United States through the Me Too movement, but most recently the Black Lives Matter movement. And so it was really activists using social media, such as Facebook events or other chats, to better organize their protest. And we saw in-person protests erupt around the world. Really, a lot of its planning and momentum was the result of social media. As well, we've seen on the business side a wave of brands and companies who are adopting new e-commerce strategies and delivery offerings to better accommodate people during the pandemic. And that also relates to not just people who used social media normally, which you would consider the younger generations, but you also saw an adaptation to older generations who at first may have been more hesitant or unwilling to use social media for e-commerce means. And now they're using it really by force of no other choice. But however, this I imagine and predict will continue to grow as e-commerce businesses continue to adapt their tools. And in addition, correlating with the rise of online activism, I think and predict that expectations will be higher for brands when it comes to increased transparency, connection, and social impact. You saw through 2020, it wasn't just people or civil society coming together to push reforms. It was also businesses. And so I believe that businesses see the benefits of moving beyond sales to further increase engaging with their customers and consumers through personable online experiences and messaging. And so those are just a few benefits that we've seen come to light in the rise of social media in general, but in particular as a result of the pandemic. However, as the panelists had also noted, there are negatives as well that we have seen. For example, data privacy and security, ethics, and, of course, what I imagine we'll be talking about more today, fake news. These topics have been major points of discussion this year, not just in the United States, not just in Pakistan, but really around the world. And, we've seen in regards to privacy, social media still being used by malicious actors to gather information about people and misuse it or sell it. We've even seen, unfortunately, in the United States as well, allegations that certain social media networks sell user data to other companies. And so in light of this, we've also seen a response from social networks and regulatory bodies who have been tightening their norms to put more policies and regulations in place. And so I predict and expect in the years to come, we'll see more, not less, regulations and restrictions from both government bodies and from the social media platforms themselves. And finally, I imagine this is what we'll really get into during the panel discussion, either by accident or design. The spread of social media has also led to the spread of false, harmful, and oftentimes malicious information. What we know and categorize as misinformation and disinformation campaigns. And so while these types of campaigns and actions take place in many forms online, oftentimes it causes real harm offline. And as Najia pointed out, the US elections of 2020 showed a bit of that. And so you've seen governments around the world, including in especially the United States, as well as social media platforms and big ones too, such as Facebook and Twitter, in part because of a groundswell of demands for reform and action from them. But still, they have responded. And these various actors have incorporated new tools and procedures and rules to keep users accurately informed. But what we have seen is that, you settle and you put down one fire and 3 more fires come up. And so, misinformation and disinformation campaigns are oftentimes spreading quicker than we can contain them. And the question becomes in the future, how will social media platforms and government regulatory agencies adapt? And can we really keep up? And so, these are a couple of thoughts for me, and I would just end by noting that, we see that social media has become an integral part of people's lives, both as individuals, but as communities, as businesses, as governments, civil society, et cetera, et cetera. And I imagine and expect, I think we all do, that this will continue to become important to all of us in the future. But it really is up to us as individuals and influencers and essentially change makers to identify what we wish to change, how we wish to change it, and ultimately come up with solutions to make social media a tool that is beneficial for all users around the world. So those are just my thoughts, and I welcome any feedback and conversations that come out of it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Brittany. I'm sure your thoughts, you're absolutely right. With social media's pros, we get a lot of cons with it as well. And they're very major cons which affect our daily life as well. I'm sure all our panelists are going to agree on that part. So I thank you so much for putting it out so nicely. Thank you so much. Let me continue with the discussion further and ask more questions with the panelists. I'm sure there's a lot to discuss on this topic. I wanted to start with Mr. Kamal, that do you think that social media can play a positive role in our society's development? Do you think it is positive?
Definitely, Tabi, definitely. And the reason why I say that is that through social media, we're having discussions that we never had before. So for example, even when we talk about things like Aurat March, for example, right now we're talking about the domestic violence bill. Our biggest problem, at least in my generation, when I was your age, was that there was no discussion. State media controlled everything. Newspapers were censored. We had no way to communicate with each other. That's opened up. So I'm very hopeful that if nothing else, the best part about social media is that regardless of the kind of conversations that are taking place, there are lots of trolls there. There's a lot of fake news, as Brittany pointed out. And this is all there. But having said that, there's a lot of discussion taking place, and that's very important. This has not happened. The kind of information explosion that we have seen with the advent of social media is unprecedented. Interestingly, much of this is in English. A lot of it is in Urdu. We are seeing a lot of it now in regional languages. So in that sense, it is very inclusionary. We have everybody part. It's not just one elite group that is taking part in this conversation. It is people of different schools of thought, people of different backgrounds, people from very diverse parts of Pakistan. They are having these conversations. They're putting out their content there. I mean, for example, I go back again to TikTok, and TikTok is something that while we make as senior or older journalists, one thinks of it as non-serious. Initially, when social media started, we thought it was non-serious, but now we are taking it very seriously because the numbers that we are seeing, like what Brittany pointed out, how it doubled from 2016. This is where the audience is going. So in that sense, yes, to answer your question, it will bring change. The discussion is there. People are talking about issues that were never talked about. In my time, for women of your age or younger women, let me just put it that way, to put their pictures and give their opinion, it was very rare that you'd see that happen. Now it's very common to have younger people talk about different topics that were early taboo, things that had to do with sexuality, things that had to do with their opinion on a number of issues, drugs, alcohol, things that had to do with their personal lives, how they're discussing those. More importantly, child abuse, violence against women, all these issues are being discussed, are being debated. These are discussions that were never had. I mean, now there was a time in families you could not talk about child abuse. It was unheard of. You could not talk about violence against women. Women would be beaten, but nobody could talk about it. All that's gone. Now, with that going, with people talking, with people discussing, I'm sure something good will come out of it. At least we will know all sides of the story.
Yeah, you're right. Because as you said, women our age, I remember my mother or my grandmother not talking about the struggles they have gone through, but I can totally talk about it. And social media has given me and other women like me or other kids or the entire generation a lot of, exposure, and it has given us a platform to talk about it. So Najia, what do you think about this question? Do you think it plays a positive role in your team? Do you think about it? Is it positive for the society's development?
Yes, it's a big yes. It
You
is,
think
and
yeah.
it is already putting pressure on mainstream media because I'm a journalist, so I will talk about the media. On mainstream media and highlighting causes and social issues that for some reason our mainstream media was not covering or does not want to cover or cannot cover for some reasons. So it is social media that can force government, institutions, and political parties to change their way of working to sustain their credibility, because the traditional gap between the rulers, institutions, and the people has shrunk. Now anyone from anywhere can have a say in political debates. They can directly reach out to the relevant authorities. They can tag them. They can ask them to take action. So social media brings accountability. You can directly raise issues or problems with the top figures or authorities. There are many issues like Kamal Sahab has mentioned, Aurat March. There was a motorway rape case. And recently, madrasa and university rape cases, they would not have gotten that much attention if there was no social media. So no doubt, social media helps mobilize communities, organize protests, raise their collective voices against the unquestioned authorities. As big media houses, they are influenced by power corridors and they do not go against their financial interest. On the other hand, social media has endless economic opportunities, especially for women and small scale workers. A lot of businesses are going on Facebook, WhatsApp, and other social media platforms. So it depends how we use it, how the society is using these platforms.
Don't you think that I totally agree with the part where it says that it has given a great use to the businesses, but don't you think like you said, the madrasa case and everything, the source of information that it comes from, like if I'm the person, I'm posting about it somewhere, I'm not sure about my security about it. There is a lot of bullying after that as well, and there's a lot of there's a little bit of tension that I will get exposed, that I posted about this thing, because social media gets to you at any second, at any minute, it will get to you. What do you think about that? I guess that is a very like debatable thing. It is very difficult for a person to come out there and post it on social media. What do you think?
I would say there are two aspects. Like if you are posting as a common person, or I would differentiate like males and females. Women have limited space for sharing their opinion. They are attacked frequently. Women's online participation has too many hurdles, like harassment. You are saying bullying is very common, and especially leaking data of women. And women journalists who are very much on social media, and they share their opinion. Most of the time, we saw the personal details of women journalists and analysts have been made public. So I would say it has become easier and more rewarding for bloggers and online users to share false information about a person, institution, or business. So because there is excessive flow of information, you are sharing your opinion, people are putting social media posts. So people do not go into in-depth information. They just read headlines and share those posts, spreading disinformation far and wide. So it's a challenge, but I see more and more women, more and more girls, they are using social media. They face bullying, they face harassment, but it's a long way to go.
That's a long way to go. On this note, I really want to ask Tahmina that have you ever been subjected to cyberbullying? Because as I said, if we're posting something, and if we are not, even if we are not posting anything, and we are an influencer, or we are on a bigger scale, there's a lot of cyberbullying to that specific person, or the posting and everything, especially for women. Even for males, I would say, even for males, cyberbullying is still there in social media. Have you been personally subjected to cyberbullying on social media?
No, thank you. Fortunately, no, I have not been.
That's a great thing.
This, but very aware of how devastating it can be for someone, both emotionally and psychologically. And I'm very careful as to the kind of content I actually, or the kind of dialogue I indulge in on social media. Because yes, I do have a certain following of people, and especially a following of young people, because of my association with higher education. So I have to be, I think, extremely careful as to what dialogue I open up. And if I open up a dialogue, it must remain on the positive note. But I've dealt with many students, unfortunately, who've been subjected to this, and I've seen how things have come spiraling down for them in every aspect of their lives. So it can be very tormenting for someone in this position. And it also depends on how you handle it once it starts, I suppose we're not that educated as to our personal rights as individuals in the society. I think we're not given that kind of information. That information is there, but we're not really have access to it, or we don't feel it's important. So once a situation starts, I think a layman is really lost, doesn't know what to do, and tries to handle it herself or himself, and then that can become quite difficult for them and for the families. So yeah, there have been cases where there have been cases of bullying, and the students have tried to handle it on their own, and it's gotten out of control. And there has been research that around 13% of teens have reported to being cyberbullied at least once, and that's quite a high percentage on social media. And there's so much access to violent content, pornography, and there's so much racist content, homophobic, religious-based content. So I think definitely cyberbullying is there, but we should, I think, even in education, I feel that we should keep people informed as to what are their rights, how can they handle this, because this is not something that you can handle on an individual scale, because it sometimes it escalates. On the other hand, sometimes people call for it, people put out stuff that they know is going to create some kind of negative feedback from other people. So it's a choice that you make for yourself. When you're on social media, it's a choice you're making by putting certain thing up. And unfortunately, if it goes out of control, you really need to have the right people to guide you of how to handle it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I being the personal, I had an incident with cyberbullying, and you're absolutely right. It crushes your world around. It turns you up. And the thing you said, that there are a lot of people who are asking for it. Like you said it, the content they're putting out there, they're actually asking for it. So I really want to know, how can we find out the authenticity of the viral content that we have? I want to ask this to Najia, if she can answer me this, that how can we find out the authenticity of the viral content that's going on?
Simple fact checking, and it is not difficult. For common people or the masses, media literacy is very much important. That can make them understand what content is authentic and what is fake or disinformation. If posts, for example, if posts are emotionally provocative, they can be false. If they invoke strong emotions in you, like anger, shock, it means there is something wrong in that post. Whenever you get a viral content, you should check the source of information. If it is trending, open those trends, and you will see and you will be amazed, because when you will check those accounts who are involved in tweeting or sharing or retweeting that content, mostly fake accounts, they don't have pictures, but have thousands of tweets with no or very less Twitter followers. So you will find copy-pasted material on those timelines. If it is on Twitter, you will notice a massive spike of tweets in a very short time, because the central person has alerted his or her keyboard warriors. So this is for masses, but for journalists, because we have some technical tools. I was talking about the masses, how they can check, but for journalists, as we test information before broadcasting it. What is the source of information? Is it reliable? If the information is confirmed by the reporter, or is it from the social media? Is the account verified from where we are getting information? If it is not, we will ask the reporter to contact to that source directly. If the information is available on authentic website, we need to check URL. If it is a news website, we need to check about us section, because that section tells you how authentic the source is. We have to watch out if known media or reputable news sites are also reporting on that issue. We would check date, for example, if the information, photo or videos are current or they are old one, because these are the tools, and there are other technical tools like Google reverse search images and other platforms that can be used to find out if the content is authentic or not.
Yes, but this is what we're talking about, the educational or any big content that is posted, to recheck it on several levels. But I hope you guys have noticed that there is a lot of irrelevant content that is posted, and then it goes viral on such extent that the entire world is, for example, there was a hashtag party hori. I guess everybody have heard about it. So it went so viral that people in India, people in outside Pakistan, everybody was doing it. But the content was not. It was just a funny content, but it went way too viral. I believe that was an irrelevant yet viral content. I want to ask Mr. Kamal, why do you think only viral content gets attention? Why not the non-viral content? Because they are more authentic, or they are more educational, or they are more impactable for our lives, rather than this little irrelevant hashtags and everything. Why do you think they get more attention?
Tabir, I think we have to put things in context. First of all, when you said it went viral and it's irrelevant, if it went viral, then it's not irrelevant. It's relevant to somebody, and I think it may not be relevant to you and I, but it is relevant to people. That's why it's gone viral. So The other thing is that it's social media. It is not news media. It is not, this is not just news. This is information. This is information that is entertainment. This is information that is, in many ways, not necessarily, Najia has pointed out the fake news. She's talked about this, you have talked about cyberbullying, all that is there. But much of the information that we have on social media, a large chunk of it is not news, it's not serious, it's not, but it is obviously relevant to someone somewhere. That's why it's becoming viral. So now your question, coming to your question, why is viral? So interestingly, when I was the editor of a newspaper, I had two hats. One was as a newspaper, print newspaper, and the other was as a web publication. What we had on the front page of the newspaper was different from what we had on the what we call the landing page, the first page of the web edition. They were different. The main story may or may not be the same. Viral stories got more play on web. But what we also realized was that in the absence of any other way to gauge how readers are, what is their interest, and people would obviously, we would be deciding in the newspaper that what is the most important story of the day. In the web edition, it would be the audience that's deciding. So stories that went viral for us were important because that showed, unless of course what Najia said, that these are stories that are fake, they're made viral through fake accounts. If that's not the case, we were very keen to understand what is it that people want to know. So that's why viral is important. It is the interest of people. But coming back to what you said, that why is viral important? Yes, viral is important, but we should look
Why
beyond
viral gets
viral.
the attention, all
Why
the
viral gets
attention. Yeah,
attention?
not
You're
the
right.
non-viral.
You're right. I think there are lots of stories out there, and that is where we as journalists or journalism students come in. That there are a lot of stories that are not viral but are very important. Maybe they're not interesting, maybe they're not entertaining, maybe they don't make us laugh or cry. But those are stories. These are the boring stories. Maybe these are the stories about education, health, population, um, water. And these are stories that are equally important. So our challenge, Tabir, is to make them go viral, make them interesting, make them such that people will read them and take action. So in answer to your question, those stories that are not viral should be made viral because there are stories out there that are equally important.
Yeah, because there are people who need to read them. They want to
Yes.
have, they should get inspiration from such post or such content that is very effective on our lives, especially for the youngsters. I am in the university right now, and I want to read about the content that is going to encourage me for my further future, rather than reading about. Yeah, you were right. It is irrelevant to me or you, but not a lot of other people. Like I also mentioned in the earlier in the start, that there are a lot of illiterate people who are using social media as well. They find it very entertaining and they like it. So you were absolutely right. You corrected me. That's so generous of you. I want to continue with another question with Ms. Tahmina, that what do you think, how does social media affect human life psychologically? As you you have worked with mental health issues as well with the students and a lot. I want to know about the generation that we're having right now, Gen Z that we have. What do you think? How does it affect our students or human lives psychologically? You.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tabir. And I could like go on and on about it. I've started working in the mental health sector as a psychotherapist since 2.5 years. And multiple studies have found that there's a heavy link between using a lot of social media and the increased risk of depression, anxiety, loneliness, self-harm, and even suicidal thoughts. It also promotes like negative experiences such as inadequacy and your life or appearance. So as you know, a lot of people, especially a lot of young people, and actually I wouldn't even classify it as young. I think nowadays a lot of people from every age bracket is using social media excessively. And there's actually a biological high that you get in your brain when somebody likes your picture on social media. And some people obsess about this so much. It is playing with our mind, and we have absolutely no idea as to what long-term damage it's doing to us. And one particularly pernicious concern is that whether time spent on social media sites is eating away time from face-to-face. And this is known as a phenomenon of social displacement. And I can't stress upon the psychological impact it's having on people. And I see clients who come in for depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts. And so much has to do with their presence on social media and how they get influenced by what's happening on social media. And we really need to kind of put a control on this. I don't know how, I don't know the solution, right? So don't ask me how we will do it, but this is going to be the biggest pandemic ever for us in the coming years. And I can say it with research, and I can say it with the education that I have on, the mental health, the health world that I'm in, that this is going to be a bigger pandemic than what we've just gone through. So
I was just about to ask you how are we going to overcome that, but you're right. It is a long way. Yeah, you're right. It is a long way. Like you said, even if somebody is liking our post or anything, it affects us a lot. It doesn't matter the age or background we're coming from. We just get too excited. I guess there are chemicals that mix up, and then and if somebody's giving a bad react, and we react to that as well a lot. So as social media is very impactful on a lot of people, like everybody who is using social media. What do you think, Mr. Kamal, that what is the role of social media in government? Because social media is impactful on normal human beings, like normal citizens, that we are using it, and we are, like Ma'am Tahmina said, that we get very anxious about the fact that somebody is sharing our content or liking it and everything. Do you think, as a journalist, do you think that government is also influenced by social media?
Definitely. There was a time when journalists who worked on digital platforms were not considered journalists. This is about 10 years ago. Even today, the Karachi Press Club and a number of press clubs do not admit people as members if they're only digital journalists. But all that is changing. A lot of it has to do with the present government as well. They are very much clued in terms of the social media presence. I think they take that very seriously. And what we are seeing is that as compared to previous governments, this government is, I think, very sensitive about its image on the social media. That's possibly why they have so many people. They have invested so much in it. Not just them, but also if you look at the armed forces, the ISPR, they also have taken social media very seriously. More importantly, Tabir, what we are seeing is that most of our government ministers, our politicians, stakeholders, opinion leaders are now using social media, especially Twitter, to issue statements. And there was a time when, as journalism students, as journalists, one could not quote people from Twitter only. Now we have come to the point that we can quote, and now the statements only come on Twitter. And if somebody says something, we can quote it, we can take their quote. So now this has become the sort of platform for information. Gone are the days of press releases and press statements, very few press conferences. Now much of the information is disseminated through social media. So in answer to your question, I think the government is taking it very seriously. And I think not only do they use it to get across their message, but they also use it to see what's happening in the country and take action when certain wrongs are highlighted.
Do you think that social media is more in these days for the government than the news media?
That's a hard question, Tabir. I think they have to do a balancing act. The mainstream media has a lot of, if you look at, they have a lot of business interests, they have a lot at stake. And the mainstream media, of course, has television. Television still has the largest audience, although now that is becoming debatable because a lot of people are watching television through their smartphones. So it is debatable. I don't think the government is willing to give more importance right now, but I think in it's a matter of time, a year or two. And what we will see is that social media, digital media will become much more important for the government as compared to the mainstream media, which includes television, newspaper, and radio.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I guess Brittany left us. She had to go somewhere. I'm glad that she got a chance to join our conversation, but we'll still continue with our discussion over here because it is getting interesting with every question that I ask you people, because you are giving really nice opinions on them. Now, I want to really want to know from Ma'am Najia that why state departments and other political parties are using social media to spread awareness. As Mr. Kamal said, that it is giving priority to social media. Government is giving priority to social media, but not that much, but not to that extent. But I have noticed a lot of Twitter tweets and a lot of Twitter accounts of politicians of big political parties, that they are using it for to spread awareness and to do important announcements. Why do you think they use it? Why do you think they are using social media more for the awareness they want to spread?
I think Kamal Saab has already explained it very well. Government can use social media to reach maximum people in a quick way, especially during emergency like COVID and any other disastrous situation. So it's a good opportunity for the government to reach out maximum people. As Kamal Saab said, now important figures and head of institutions, ministers, they can give statements in form of tweets. So that is a very quick way to communicate. And it is also cost effective and time saving for media, because we don't have to go for the press conference now. Another reason why government use social media and why it is important for the government to use it, it is accountability. Accountability, in a sense, government can check the progress of the development projects and any incompetencies of administration, ministers, or bureaucrats through the feedback of digital audience. But that is only a suggestion because it is not being done. I would say it depends how a government use it. Mostly we observe it is being used for publicity, self-praising, or criticizing opposition media or journalists. That is unfair. There could be a better use of these platforms. And I would add, there is still deadlock on social media amended rules. The third version of the social media rules was published by the Ministry of Information Technology and Telecommunication earlier this month. The removal of unlawful online content rules 2021. So digital rights activists, they are protesting against amended rules because the most problematic provisions remain unchanged. The draft that was public recently, social media companies, they are also disappointed with the proposed revisions as well. So the government should take all these stakeholders on board, and they can use better use of social media.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about it. I'm sure with time, it's going to evolve more, and people are going to, even the government is going to know how to use it more effectively for the citizens. I want to further ask this question to both of you, Ms. Najia and Mr. Kamal, that according to a news report, social media and gadgets are playing the role of digital gangsters by tracking devices. What are your opinions on this? Any one of you can start. Let's start with Mr. Kamal, because he just smiled about it.
I think in terms of the usage of digital instruments like cell phones, like other smartphones that we have, or laptops and all that, to understand better your question, you're talking about how these are used to keep track of people. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, yes.
So there are two or three ways how we see this. The one is that I think this is something that also Taimina alluded to when she talked about the addiction, and you also talked about it to social media and to. So the addiction, the inability of us to keep a distance from our smartphones, that is a problem. Taimina has used a very strong word. She said pandemic of the next pandemic. I unfortunately, very sadly, I have to agree with her that yes, possibly that's where we're going. And part of it also is how we are being tracked, not just in terms of our cell phones, but also our consumption of news, information, the whole thing about how how we're given these logarithms, how we're told that this is like, for example, if Tabir goes on Facebook, and there are certain suggestions that she gets, and those suggestions are based possibly on some emails that she sent from Gmail a day earlier, or even things like if Najia is going on a flight, she has booked a ticket, and then she suddenly gets suggestions on her Facebook about places that she can stay at her destination without her actually inquiring about this. This is scary. It's not just about where you're going. I mean, Tabir, you actually, if you go into Google, you can find out all the places that you visited in the past several years to the point of day by day, hour by hour, what you were doing, which is pretty accurate. So if you don't turn off that on the tracking on your phone, your phone is tracking and sending information out. The question, of course, is that when you turn that tracking off, is it still tracking? I think it still is. So having said that, so it's monitoring at different levels. It's monitoring you physically, it is monitoring your conversations, it is monitoring your activity, it is monitoring your habits. So there was, I mean, when a long time ago, there were a number of movies. George Orwell, of course, is the best source of, like, when we come to predicting the future and how everything that we're doing is gradually being monitored, controlled, what we're saying, what we're doing, who we're meeting, what we're eating, all this is. So in terms of tracking, tracking is not just about physical tracking. It's not just about where you're taking your phone. It's more about everything that you're doing. That is the scary part. And that is where the debate starts. And this is a debate that started already in Europe. It started in Australia, where Australia said that Google, by the way, is the world's largest news organization because it takes news from all the news sites and puts it together and makes it its own. So all these things are questions that have come up. Najee referred to laws that are in place in Pakistan. These laws have to be looked at as to privacy laws about how much can these organizations, how much can they monitor, how much can they take information, how much information can they use. These are questions, and I think journalism students should be very interested in these questions about privacy, security, the lack of any sort of law that prevents this. I think it's a very important point.
Exactly. Najia, what is your opinion on this?
Okay, I would just add, yes, devices are tracked, but you can be mindful of this because of GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. Many social media companies, now they ask people to allow tracking. So you can change those settings whenever you are downloading any app. You have to be very careful when, you click the button agreed. So educate yourself regarding cookies, what you have allowed app to see, location, tracking, etc. Because this will happen more and more, as Tamina said, it's a pandemic. So it needs to be limited. Don't give privilege to people to decide what they allow us to see or what they allow us to do. Educate yourself, and they should have media literacy training, I would say, especially for women and young girls, because they are the soft target.
Yeah, but as you said, we don't have to agree with everything or the cookies that we have, but being a young generation person, when something pops up on my phone, I just want to get done with it and agree and give access to all my pictures and contacts and get done with it and come on the social media and tweet about it or post about it. This is what I used to do before coming to the university. And then when I came to my first semester, I remember I just cancelled everything and took the privacy in my hands. But still, I think there is a lot of, as Sir Kamal said, that there is a lot of exposure to these sites of ourselves that they can track where we are traveling or what we are talking. Even whatever we are talking about, our sir once told me that whatever we talk about frequently, so our mobile phones catches that as well, our devices catches that as well. So that is a very scary situation for a lot of people, but we as a young generation don't take it very seriously, which we should actually, because it is very necessary for us. So on this note, I really want to ask Ms. Tamina that how do you think social networking or social sites are affecting our social life? Because as I said, I just want to get done with everything and come onto the social media and post that I was eating this and I was traveling here. So what do you think how is it affecting our social life comparatively?
Tabir, so I can just speak for myself, and so my social networking life is very separate from my social life. And I have tried, at least in my life, not to mix them. So I use my social networking mostly for my work, and I have a large audience of people who are maybe following me. But whatever I do in my private life, I like to keep it that way, because I'm from the generation before social media,
But
right?
as a psychologist, I want to ask you. Obviously, I've dealt with a lot of people of my age or elder than me or younger than me who are going through this. What do you think about that?
Right. So firstly, I'd just like to correct, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a psychotherapist.
A
Okay?
psychotherapist, sorry.
just for the record, right? So I used to find it very weird initially when this whole trend started, how everybody would just put up everything on social media, like from what they're eating to what time they're waking up to what they're wearing to where they're going. And I'll be very honest with you, I was there at one point as well. And then I just woke myself up and I said, what's happening? Why am I even doing this? Does anybody even want to know, or are they even interested in what I'm doing? Or is it for my own ego boosting? So I guess a lot of it is like you need to ask these questions. But plus now I've become a very, very non-judgmental and tolerant person. So if someone is happy sharing what they had for breakfast, I'm happy for them too. I make no judgments on that. But yes, I think before you put up something on social media, ask that question: who is it for?
Exactly. That's a very thoughtful question. Who is it for? It is a very we don't ask that and we just put it up and we think it is for ourselves, but it's actually not for ourselves. It is for the world. We want people to know that we are eating this, or we want to. And there is an element of show off as well. As we have evolved with social media, I believe we really want to tell people what we are going through, or we really want to tell people that we have a lot of money or we have a luxurious life and all, and this affects a lot of people who are not living up to that life as well, because it is very disturbing for many. So for the closing remarks, I really want to ask this one question to everyone who's on the panel right now, that what do you think, let me put it this way, that what do you think is social media, in your final opinion? Is it good, is it bad for a individual, or is it a mixture of, like, it's a mixed emotion, what it is, in your take, what it is? I know I asked this earlier, but I want a closing remark on this so that we can come to a conclusion that social media is totally good in your opinion, totally bad in your opinion, or it is a mixture of emotions. Let's start with Miss Najia. What do you think about it?
Okay, so final remarks is it is the use. You want to use it for good or bad. It can be very good. It can make you hero. It can be very bad. It can destroy your life.
Okay, you have a mixture. It has every element. What do you think, Mr. Kumar?
Yeah.
I think I agree with Najia 100%. I'll just follow on what she said and say that when she said it's the use, I'll just also say that it has great potential. But again, it is the use, how you use it. If you can use it for positivity, if you can use it for better things, how to improve society, how to create more awareness, it has great potential. So again, if we use it positively, it's a very good thing.
That's nice. What do you think, ma'am?
Agreed with both panelists. I think it's the usage which is very important. But I'm an artist. I don't live in the black and white. I live in the shades of gray. So I guess that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, that's a very good take in the end. Personally, being as a student or being a youngster these days, I used to take social media a lot of positive earlier in my life, and I used to post everything, and I used to think social media is everything and it's my best friend. But recently, I just realized that I it's not everything that I want. I should have my personal space as well. So I also agree with all of you. I have learned the hard way actually, but I have learned with time. Thank you so much for joining me, all of you. It was really nice. It was a pleasure having a conversation, having this conversation with you. I'm sure our audience is going to learn a lot about social media and hashtags and everything, and how to put your personal life and social media life in a separate cage. That is very important for us. I'm sure people are going to benefit from this as well. Thank you for coming on thank you for giving us your prestigious time, and thank you so much for coming on our discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Love.
Love.
Nafis.